Hi everybody, Greyfist here. This one's on religion, and I'm always a little hesitant to talk about religion because I don't wish to offend anybody. I do, after all, have several friends that are religious, and I don't want to offend them in any way. But at the same time, I also believe that we need to seriously reevaluate religion in our modern day society. And so there's a couple things that I want to talk about. And this first video is me basically answering the question, what would it take to believe? Now, occasionally I'm asked this question, essentially, what evidence would I require to believe in a supernatural deity? And usually they're talking about an Abrahamic God, but it interests me because almost as often as I hear this question, I will hear other atheists or agnostics say that they would need to witness a miracle, which I think is not logically consistent. I'm going to go over two reasons why I believe that's true, and then I've got kind of a conclusion there. So my first example comes from Star Trek, The Next Generation more specifically, and there's an episode called The Devil's Due, which is in Season 4, Episode 13. In that episode, a being comes to the planet Ventax 2 claiming to be a deity named Ardra. Now, Ardra is one of their deities from a legend in which she saved Ventax 2 by instituting various reforms in return for claiming the planet within 1,000 years. So this being comes after 1,000 years and claims that she is that deity and she is there to honor their contract. In other words, she wants to take possession of the entire planet. Over the course of the episode, this Ardra exhibits several what we would call miracles. She changes form, she causes earthquakes, she causes other people and herself to disappear and reappear at her will. And in the real world, if someone was able to do that now, we would think that those things were miracles, and I'm sure that there would be very many people who would bow down and worship her. But the interesting thing about this episode is that, of course, over the episode, Picard and his crew are able to show that Ardra is merely an alien with some special technology, and they're able to reproduce everything that she did. So there was no miracle involved. Now, a similar argument can be made about time travel. If you think about it, and you imagine that someone from our current day traveled back even just 1,000 years with a computer and obviously sources of electricity and so on. But there are so many things that we are able to do now that would have been considered miracles to the people 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. For example, healing the sick. I mean, we have cures for leprosy. Jesus was said to have performed one of his miracles, which was curing lepers. The point is that there are a lot of things that we can do now that would be characterized as miracles, even several hundred years ago. And so if someone from our time were to travel back, they could pass themselves off as gods. They could heal diseases, they could predict events like solar events, for example, eclipses and the appearance of comets and so on and so forth. They would, if they brought the correct technology, be able to predict the weather. They'd be able to travel at great distance very quickly. If they had an airplane, for example, or a helicopter, they'd be able to fly through the air. And so it would not be hard to convince the people of 100 or several hundred or several thousand years ago that this modern day person was a god. Now, of course, obviously, they're not gods. We don't think that people who do those things are gods because we all do those things. So the point is that even if a being were to come to us now, we couldn't rule out that they didn't come from the future or that they didn't come from some other planet where the technology is simply more advanced. Physics hasn't ruled out time travel. Physics also hasn't ruled out interstellar travel, so we can't say for sure. My second example is a response to the answer that I occasionally hear from other atheists, which is, I would need to talk to God. About a year ago, I went out for drinks with my girlfriend at the time, and after a few drinks I wasn't feeling well, so I decided to go home. I asked her if if she's going to be all right, if she needed me to call her a taxi or whatever. And she said that her friends were going to be meeting her soon, so I didn't need to worry about it. So I went home. The next morning, however, she was very angry with me, and she had a very different recollection of the previous night's event. She claimed that she had walked me home, and then she had gotten in a fight with me because I refused to drive her home, and then I essentially abandoned her. Now, I am 100% certain that it did not happen that way. She was 100% certain that it did. But neither of us could prove it because we've both been drinking. And so it was uncertain whose recollection of events was correct. I give this example because it's just a good way of illustrating how easily the mind can be fooled, how easily memories can be made or destroyed that aren't really real. And so anybody who's ever been drunk, or I've also had a similar experience while being under the effects of anesthesia. I have never done illegal drugs, but I imagine that illegal drugs can have the same effect. Anybody who's done any of those things will tell you that you have memories that may not correspond to reality, or you may forget things that really did happen, or you may remember things that didn't really happen. And so the point is that if you believe that a supernatural entity, either God or angels or demons or whatever, is talking with you, what are the chances that it's not simply your mind playing tricks on you? You're in a half-waking state, for example, and one part of your brain's talking with another in a dream, but one part of your brain doesn't realize that it's a dream. It believes that it's hearing something. Or, how many of us have internal dialogues? And how easy would it be to believe that suddenly, rather than being purely internal, part of the conversation is now supernatural? What if you just never learned to distinguish the two? What if you've been convinced by being immersed in a culture that accepts and promotes that sort of thing for decades, that you have an internal dialogue that you interpret as being supernatural in origin? How often is it that deities will command us to do the things that we want to do? So speaking with God is not enough to convince me either. And there's many other responses that I hear occasionally, but I'm not going to respond to all of them. Those are the two major ones that I often hear in my responses to those. The simple conclusion that I draw from these two examples is that there's no amount of evidence that anyone could present to convince me that a being was supernatural. There are always other explanations that don't need to evoke supernatural causes, and I tend to believe that whenever there's a solution, or an explanation that is not supernatural in origin, it's more likely to be that explanation than a supernatural one. So apologists will often like to hide behind the statement that God is beyond space and time, and that's fine, but then you can't prove that he exists any more than I can disprove that he exists, because empirical evidence exists only in space and time, and so you can't use one to prove something that you can't disprove. So that was the whole point of this video. I hope that it's been interesting to you and it's provoked a few thoughts. As always, leave your comments below and I'll try to get back to them. Check out some of my other videos. They're not all religious, but many of them are mathematical and scientific in topic. So, and please subscribe. I hope you have enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.